Hello, welcome everyone to our second episode of Leverage to Build Wealth. My very special guest is my friend and coach, Christine Beckwith. She is a multi-book author, top-selling author, and president and chief operating officer of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching and Consulting. She is truly a professional's professional. She is elite in every way, and but even more important, she is authentic and real. She's going to give it to us real. And I'm so very grateful to have you on today, Christine. Thank you so very much.
Oh my God, so great to be here. I'm so excited to see you do this. I'm applauding you, and I hope this thing takes off to the moon for you. And mainly because I don't mind jumping right in here and telling you one of the things that I've always been struck by you from the beginning of meeting you is your voice. And I'm not talking about how you sound right now. I'm talking about the way you speak when you're in a room, like, you're often in rooms that we have large community groups in, and you are heard, and, you cut through a lot of noise. When you speak, people listen. You usually are very additive. You level the conversation up. And so to me, this seems like a very natural thing that you would be bringing that wonderful voice. And maybe you're just coming into it yourself of the realization through
Yeah,
prompting of people like me that are saying, do it, go do it.
yeah. Your
But you're on the
encouragement is
right path.
thank you. Your encouragement means a lot to me. You're especially what you have created with 2020.
Thank you.
I love participating and watching and learning and being coached by you. And uh, I'm
My
definitely going to
honor.
encourage before this is over anyone looking to truly level up their game to reach out to you because 2020, what you've created is incredible. Well, let's get to it.
Yeah.
Um, Please, one thing I love is hearing everyone's individual story and not looking for an echo chamber. No one wants that, but everyone's individual story, what makes them who they are. And I have yet to find an easy life story. And uh, the the flavor that life brings to what you bring to the table. Can you give us uh, 5 minutes or so? Tell us about
Sure.
you and why this is important to have this opportunity to listen to you today.
Yeah. I mean, I always start by saying I don't think my story is necessarily special or unique. But I have told my story. Somewhere in the walk of my life, I would catch the reactions of people. And by my surprise, even as a young girl, when I would accomplish maybe, you know, obstacles or overcome obstacles or reach, different levels of things that statistically people would be telling me wasn't possible, I did recognize, like, the wow factor in my life along the way where people were like amazed,
Yeah,
I always equate it to that. I've had that moment when Rudy runs onto the field,
yeah,
in the movie Rudy. I've had that moment 20 times in my life where I have fought for some unbelievable, unattainable goal and had everybody in the world telling me I was dreaming too high. And, so my story is simple. I grew up in rural New Hampshire, central New Hampshire, to two teenage parents and humble beginnings, and no harm or foul against them. They supplied all of the means of a beautiful home and rich in all the ways that mattered. We went to church on Sundays. We had a strong moral fiber as a family unit. We were taught the lessons that old school parents teach, in the home and should do more of today. And we, were generous, even though we lived with lack. And, that was my upbringing. And so it won't surprise you when I'm 14 and I'm going into high school and I'm picking, college prep over business, and I'm forging my mom's name on this permission slip because she wants me to go into the practical level-headed business because one day maybe I'm going to be able to be a secretary, she says. And
yeah,
I say, well, I want to go into college prep. my family was vehement that I didn't do that because they didn't feel that calculus and foreign languages and things like that were practical for where they were trying to get me off of the lack of income to send to college. And
Gotcha.
so I, worked my little tail off. I had good guidance counselors. There would be a moment in my high school, my first semester where I'm scared to come home with the report card that shows what I did, that I'd gone into college prep. And therein lies a great story in one of my books where I share that my mom marched into school and, told the principal that I needed to be moved over to the business. And he stood in that, adversity with her, and that conflict. And, I was afraid of my mom. I still am afraid of my mom at 55. And watching him like kind of wrestle her between reality and dreaming was what I took from that conversation. And he came with hope. And so fast forward, I would go through high school. She acquiesced, and I was the kid, living in the school that, by the way, the school we went to and the town that we lived in was one of the wealthiest towns and still is today in the state of New Hampshire. And so even though we lived on the outskirts of town and we truly were not part of the economic averages of the town we lived in, we had a front row seat to opulence in every direction. My grade school girlfriends had nannies, and like one of my best girlfriend's fathers was the president of Bell Atlantic Telephone, and she
Wow.
lived in like a $5 million house. And when I would go over there, they had butlers, and you know, it was crazy. It was crazy to live where I lived and to be surrounded with that. It also was
Yeah.
hard because I couldn't do the things that other kids could do. And there were golf clubs and ski clubs and, photography clubs and things I couldn't do because I couldn't buy the camera. I couldn't get the skis. I couldn't buy the golf clubs. Like that was happening. And the long story short is that I won 13 scholarships the night of our awards banquet, which gets me to college. And then I take a job at a credit union as an assistant to a female originator. And herein begins the
Oh,
banking story.
yeah.
And I put myself through college going for sports medicine and nutrition, learning from one of the most iconic, Italian business women that you could be, who was very rare, very, very unheard of.
Yeah.
And by the time I get out of college, I want to become an originator myself. And the rest is kind of history. I've spent 37 years in the field. I would reach through the ranks and, I stayed an originator for 20 years. I was an originating branch manager. I became an area, divisional, district, regional, and then senior vice president. I oversaw H&R Block's national mortgage platform with 1,250 employees. I closed that operation down, put myself out of work during the mortgage implosion, and then I got picked back up by Joe Pinabianco to help build Annie Mac. And then I go on that ride for 12 years as the national director of real estate and sales. And so that brings you to 2020. Somewhere along the lines, I realize I'm a writer, I'm a teacher. Um, I find my purpose in life. I age, I have a child. And I go through some tragedies, and I'm still going through tragedies. I mean, as I sit here right now, I lost my sister a year ago. She has a very tragic story, another story for another day.
My
Um,
condolences, by the way.
yeah, thank you. And so I'm a fighter and I'm a believer in setting goals and trying to accomplish them. And my life is just a series of that, leading to this moment that I'm on this podcast right here. I still have goals this year. I have new heights. I like to test myself and see if I can do things I didn't think I could do. And I'm still doing that.
Thank you for sharing that. Today's theme is about the bounce back, and you definitely are a true expert by experience on bouncing back. And it's interesting. I believe that life is really created from of moments. It's not linear. I believe life truly is based on moments of our life changing moments. and
Mhm.
moments to moments to moments. And for me, success is to gather as many of those moments and have the biggest chest of those kind of life-changing moments. Um, not even though the premise is about building wealth. Wealth is more than just money, right? And is definitely a big part of that. But for me, that wealth of experiences and progress. I remember hearing on another gentleman's podcast where he talked about what's more important, money, family, relationship, or progress. And I'll be honest with you, progress for me is that, because if you have a relationship but it's not progressing, it can
Mhm.
be hell, right?
Mhm.
And I believe that, I'm a person of faith. I believe that God wants us to progress. And so I believe that everything revolves around like progress, and not progress just for progress sake, but like intentful, meaningful progress of moving everything. And then within that framework, everything else is richness. There's substance and beauty to that. And these aha moments, are incredible. And I love that. And I've got 6 kids. Having
Yeah.
those moments is everything. With that being said, what would you say is one of the transformative bounce back aha moments that you feel is part of your foundation? Like it is a cornerstone of what
Mhm.
you view you are. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, learning about who I was as I grew older, we grow wiser, we look inward. I had this great lesson, which I've shared in my books, Breaking the Cycle, and again in Finding Honor, I expand on it in the first chapter of Win or Learn. I talk very deeply about this particular intersection that I'm going to share as the answer. And that was, building H&R Block all the years and working so hard to get to the table of the executive level. The very first meeting that I go into, it's a new CEO that had just been brought in. They had transferred the CEO that I'd grown up with all the years.
Mm,
And so the first problem I'm given is, how do we get small enough to survive what would later become the mortgage implosion? We were on the front end of that. And I'm a new executive. And the only mathematic equation that I could come up with after 72 hours was complete closure, because it was a publicly traded company. And what was at risk was shareholder price on Wall Street for the major firm, for the international firm of H&R Block. And so in hindsight, I kind of realized like I had my Wolf of Wall Street moment
mm,
myself in my career, where those types of shot calling decisions were on my table. And to make a decision, if you're in a growth mindset and a building mindset, you can be very Pollyanna if you put on your blinders. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. Like when I'm building, I shut all negative things out. And that's what I had done for the prior 12 years leading up to that moment. It was very anti everything that I was built by in my fiber to come back with the answer I came back with, which was that total closure was necessary. Now, I didn't know if that was right or wrong. I was shutting myself out of $1 million job.
mm,
And I knew I was putting 1,250 people on the street. And at that moment, there had not been massive closures yet. So I
oh,
wasn't like looking around going, everybody's closing, I'll close. I
gotcha.
just knew what was at stake. And I had played out the scenarios of best, base, worst. And this would become a pivotal moment for two reasons in my career and my life. In my career, because I would be reveled by the industry for having closed H&R Block in the black. Our last quarter books closed in the black. And
Mm,
I earned a six-figure bonus in that last quarter on my way out, because I made a decision not to have, not for us to go on. And so I accomplished the impossible feat in a life-saving move for the major firm. And I got written about. I got written about by major magazines. I got written about by newsworthy newspapers. And it would solidify my spot in the history of the American banking industry in such a way that I was known for having made a really intelligent move. And then
Yeah.
what would follow for the years behind and all the desecration. I mean, when Merrill Lynch and places like that fall to the negative and total implosion, as you will, and we didn't, it really, I would love to say it was all strategy. Part of it was luck because it was really one of those 50-50 scale things. That was professionally profound, and it would pave way for the likes of me getting executive jobs in the future, or the job that would lead me to the next
Yeah.
big build
Yeah.
out. Personally, I was devastated. I had a new baby. I had trekked myself 34 weeks of my 40-week pregnancy trying to save the company by airplane all across the country. I spent the final 6 months helping people do their resumes and offboarding them in depressing conversations. I was depressed. And I went and rented a lake house not far from where I'm sitting in this exact moment, literally on the same street that I'm sitting on right now,
Oh,
about a
wow.
half a mile away. I know. And I wrote Wise Eyes, See Your Way to Success. I really had finally gotten to the point where I could see what a glorious ride the prior years had been. And I was grieving the loss of, the company, and
Yeah.
wondering where my next step was. And I sat there with my new baby and I wrote Wise Eyes. And then I took a job at a boutique shop, and I had to really get over my ego. I had to take a small position, and it was a 50 loan officer boutique shop out of Boston. That company, the first paycheck that I got bounced because of what was going on with the mortgage implosion.
Wow.
And I had made this decision, and all these loan officers had followed me from the local market that were put out of a job by me. And I would end up brokering the sale of that boutique to Joe Penabianco, who had 60 loan officers in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, so that we could get picked up and saved from imminent death. And the combination of those two teams would begin the journey of Annie Mac's
Oh,
growth.
wow.
Yes. And so that moment in my life, I've written so much in the books about
Yeah.
what I grew, how I grew through that. So I just always thought to that point, like, everything good that happens to you is the way life should be. You're going for the trophy, you're going for the award, you're going for the prize, you're going for the win. And I never understood what loss does to you.
Yes.
That was like one of those moments in my life where I experienced unexpected loss. And, God knows from there, thank God I learned those things, because the next, 20 years of my life there would be a lot more loss in both personal and professional ways. And I learned survival techniques that I've now written about in Finding Honor, The Journey to the Truth, which is that we're all seeking happiness and success. And we really need to look at it through a proper lens and a real lens. And for the first time, I came clean to the world, and I shared my darkest moments. And it wasn't a book about success. It was a book about failure and overcoming failure. And it really liberated me. And I'll leave it there. I'll
Good.
say that is the moment that I become, I think, more real in my life story, and that people connect to me on a deeper level, because until that point, I was just this shiny penny that always won. Everything I touched had turned to gold. I really had figured out the path to business success.
Oh,
And I
wonderful.
was picked because I was a good bet to be a winning horse in the
Yeah.
race.
That's interesting. It brings up a couple very interesting questions. Some you kind of addressed is, um, and this is something someone who's not an entrepreneur just would not understand. And when you're at the executive position, you're the closest thing to an entrepreneur before an entrepreneur when you're at that executive level, because it is your baby. And you mentioned that aspect of mourning and going through that process. I mean, like, when you truly build something, it is your baby. It does have life. And when you see that get decimated by things outside of your control, the market and all these things, it's like watching your child get hit by a car, and I have seen my son get hit by a car, and I understand what that pain feels like in that
Wow.
emotional distress.
Yeah.
And it
Wow.
it is real, it's palpable. It is. And a lot of people who don't understand, like who just have and there's nothing negative about this, it's just different, an employee mentality where you just punch in, punch out. They don't understand because they're just going for the paycheck, and this is whether it's job security or whatever reasons. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're building something, and you're an executive and you're building something, and there's ramifications of these decisions. It brings me to this next question, is because from the corporate standpoint, I understand where everyone loves you. You're helping a business close into black, but at the same time, it's in a way you're being vilified by those who are losing their jobs, because it's a recession when everyone's hurt. It's a depression when you're hurt, right? When the reality hits yourself. And for what I know of you, and knowing you for over 3 years now, uh, you're easy to love, and you're
Thank
straight.
you.
For me, you're an older sister who loves you, but will beat you up if you need to. And it's because of that love. It's the,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull punches. It's like, I'm going to be straight with you because I love you. And I can't imagine that anyone, when you're with H&R Block, would have anything but that sentiment as well. But how did you endure going through that hard decision, knowing that families were going to be devastated, but that was the right thing to do? And and then using that in moving forward, in business, in life in
Yeah.
general. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, I didn't have any experience with letting people go, and I was being guided by HR on, the PC things to do and say. And when we went on the road and flew around to help build out resumes and offboard people. But the truth was, I threw that script right, in the wastebasket because when we got there and you were looking at the whites of the eyes of the people that had fought for you, that you had asked to grow and build and work hard and show up, and they had, and you could see the hurt and sadness and even fear, because money that is lost to homes is fearful. It became very real for me, and it was hard. It got harder and harder in terms of me understanding the gravity as each conversation was taking place. I spent exhaustive hours at each location until the last person had asked me the last question at these locations, talking through their pain, sometimes just listening, not really having all the answers. I was exhausted for 6 full months doing the work that we did in the end of that company. But I feel like it's like, you're in a battle every day for your life and your businesses. And in some cases, you're going to lose the war, and you're going to have casualties in that war. And at
Yes.
the end of that, you've got to ask yourself, was I a good leader? Did I lead them the right way? Was I careless? And I really felt like I had done everything I could have done, and that I kind of left it all on the field, if you will. And so today, what that gave me was a tremendous gift. And I would tell you this, I have terminated a lot of people through consolidation. I've watched other people do it. I've watched a lot of leaders try to figure this thing you just said out, which is, I have a big heart. You describe me as somebody that will be real and, pull punches. The truth is, I don't know how I do that. It's how I'm wired. If you've ever, I've watched female basketball coaches that come to mind. I won't name names, but I've seen coaches running down the side of the court as the players are going down the court, and they're screaming, take the shot or whatever they're screaming, block them, get the rebound. And they're in that game. They're not on the field, but they are in that game emotionally. They are vested in that player, and they're running the paces. They're on the side, they're outside that line, but they're running the paces, and every bit of their soul is in those moments of those plays. And I was that type of coach. you know, whether it was good, bad, or ugly, I had a shovel in my hand. If I was asking them to dig harder, I'd dig harder. If I asked them to stay late, I stayed latest. And I think that when you do that, you gain the respect of your team and then everything rises. And so when you fall and you have to do tough things, it's not forgotten that you have a heart or compassion. I don't think it can be faked, by the way. I think
No.
some leaders are callous in their approach to certain things, and they're the ones that churn and burn employees. And I've had a lot of pickup. When I became a consultant in 2018 and I decided I had had my last day in this business and I was growing tired, I had always said I would go out like the Seinfeld, and I did exactly that. I was so popular at Annie Mac and so
Yeah.
revered. And when I gave my notice to leave, they were devastated and they made me work the whole damn year. I gave a year's notice, which was required under my contract, and they made me work 365 days. And then they bought the first contract of 2020 when I opened my doors, no joke.
Oh,
And they're
that's
still
cool.
and they're still here.
Yeah.
And I will say that that's a wonderful feeling when you aren't being pushed out and you, even though I could see the end of, I could see myself getting slower. I was getting tired and I didn't want to fizzle out. I wanted to go out like leaving them wanting more. And when I tell you, when they announced at our annual summit, and there were grown men that were crying in the audience that were up on their feet, and I was crying from the stage. And I
Yeah.
wasn't ready to leave, and they weren't ready for me to leave. But when I went into consulting, the whole industry supported me. Like people that had worked for me 20 years prior called me up and they're like, I don't know if I can afford it, but you were the best boss I had back then or whatever. And they wanted a piece of me now. And so I'm still living on the ether of, I believe, the heart I put into this industry. And I think that's going to carry me through to my end. I do. And I won't do it unless I'm going to put my heart in it. And if I got to say something hard to you, you can promise that I am doing it because I know you got more and I'm going to pull the punch from you to get more. And so I know the basis of that pulling of that punch has to start from loving one another. If you're going to take somebody and say, you're not giving me enough, and they're saying, yes, I am, and you're saying, no, you're not, you've got more, and you're making them angry and they're standing up and they're trying to say no. Like that fight is a worthy fight because when you get that person to break through and you see their capabilities, when I have put more belief in people than they've had in themselves at times because I could see what they could not see.
Yeah. Isn't that so true though? Isn't that easy to see? Like, barring narcissistic, okay, which comes, with
In our field.
you know, alpha
Yeah.
alpha roles. Isn't it interesting how many people will say, I can see how that person could be successful, yet they'll look at they'll weigh against their greatest perceived struggles against someone's perceived strengths and then discount themselves out of opportunities. It's like they're
100%.
blocking their own shot before they even take it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really unfortunate, and you brought up some point that I think will help transition to the next point about talking about the bounce back and why I think it would be extremely valuable for any professional, especially, whether someone's in the retail industry or broker industry, whatever, even a totally different industry, sales and insurance, anything to do when you have to influence and persuade others and you got to lead others to truly reach out to you, is understanding like these fundamentals, this part of your story of recognizing the contraction of the business is important for people when you're building a business, when you're not building a hobby, you're not building a social network, you're building a business that is meant to be uh, successful. And you do no one a disservice by going out of business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know, you're not helping people by going out of business, right? When you're able to stay in business in the regards of something that the market can sustain, right? And you don't help someone if you hire them and put them in the wrong position. If you
Correct.
are mishiring because you have a bleeding heart, you love this person, you're a great friend, but you hire them for a role that they're not qualified or capable for. They're not coachable for, right? Like, are you helping them? No, I put forth that you're actually hurting them. And in Ruth, in one of sessions that we had a while back, she mentioned politely inviting them to be happy elsewhere. Because that is important. If you truly want people to be happy and successful, you make sure you hire right. And I think that's a big
Mm-hmm.
part. Hire right so you don't have to fire wrong, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of
Sure.
scenarios. And from an executive position, from someone who's trying to grow and their level of their business, right sizing a business is crucial, because if a company is
Yes,
too top heavy and you can't stay in business, who are you truly helping? And
exactly.
so I love what you shared because
Thank you.
are hard scenarios. But you know what? I'd rather be in the trenches with someone who's made hard decisions and has come out and says, hey, you know what? I got the war wounds, but I've got the scars to prove it. But I also got the medals. I've got the
Mhm.
success to be able to
Yeah.
prove I can close the deal. We can move forward. And when you're following someone, uh, that, especially when you're investing a lot of company capital to have a true coach, you want to make sure they can deliver. And this is where I know um, that you work with a lot of direct competitors, and you're the coach. You have the ear and mind and motivation to people who are fiercely competitive against each other in our industry. And I love that. I love that because you're able to show, hey, I'm a professional and I can keep confidences and I can help these people be successful. When you're dealing with these alpha personalities,
Mm-hmm.
and you're dealing with helping them level up, what are some of the obstacles you're seeing from business professionals today in how they're trying to deal with bouncing back as an organization for 2024? And then we'll go into that and use that as our wrap up for
Yeah.
our
Yeah. So
session.
two things there. You're asking me about dealing with personalities with big egos and the alphas, and then, about the bounce back.
Yes.
I'll start with the alphas and big egos. I mean, first of all, I'm an alpha with a big ego. So I'm
Yes.
going to just say that. Um, I say that because at some point in my life, I really realized, because I had some wonderful coaches that pointed some things out. I was domesticized to, by a couple of parents that were kids. And I've written about in my book, Finding Honor, that the way I got my mother's attention, who's a very hard nosed New Englander and's gone through her own life's tragedies and isn't super emotional, was by reward. When I would come home with good grades, or I won a contest, or I got a blue ribbon, or whatever it was, I would see, I'd get a rise out of her. And so I spent my whole life trying to chase those medals and trophies for that. And it took me a really long time in my adult life to come to terms with why I was an overachiever. And I think that's what really drives egos and alphas, is that it's accomplishment. And we're inflating our own self-worth through these things, but there's a psychology behind that. And because I've gone
Yes.
through the hard work, internal work of understanding myself, I have a greater appreciation for the likeness of those people. And they're not, I may be encountering someone that hasn't had the self-awareness that I've had, and the humbling that I've had,
Yeah.
or the reasoning around why I did certain things, and the overcorrecting places where I would level back down. Today, I hardly ever don't push someone ahead of me to the stage or to the interview, or, I don't really coach anymore here, much. I'm in the back room like the dean of schools. I do a little bit of consulting. And that's even an evolution in the 5 years since I started. I strategically started with my name and face because I was starting a company that needed to pull people that I had worked with. But eventually I propped up the company logo, and the brand would pull in 20 more coaches, and I would go to the back room. And so somewhere when you're encountering alphas and you're encountering egos, people are on their own journey of self-awareness. They don't understand why they like attention or accomplishment, but I promise you there's a reason. And inside the void they're trying to fill lies the answer. I have figured out my void, and I have figured out how to love myself at a higher level. I wasn't always as honest as I am today. I wasn't as always real.
Mhm.
And finding honor, the journey to the truth. I don't mean to lead it back to a book or sound like I'm selling books,
No,
but
it's
I had to
important.
write that book, and I didn't think I'd publish that book until I was 80 and on my deathbed, because I shared things that embarrass me to this day when people ask me about it. But it was my truth and my real journey of personal development. It was my greatest development. So that's my answer to that. So yes, I see some really rough things. I also encounter fake alphas, and fake alphas are a whole nother animal. And that is a person that really is acting an alpha, but they really lack the confidence. And that isn't me calling them out. It's just they're a different type of person to deal with.
Yeah.
And I see through some of those antics, and they're the worst, by the way. They usually are the ones that are going to fight the hardest, be the loudest, do the most destruction
Yeah.
in the conversation. So with all of that in mind, the bounce back this year is going to require humility, in that leaders are having to let go of everything that rose the tide to the point where it falls. And they've got to cut expenses, cut staff. They've got to get lean, mean. And for a lot of these guys, doing that exercise has had to be done 20 times in the last 3 years
Mm.
in levels. For the originator that's bouncing back, I think a lot of people have quit our industry because, let's face it, if you go to a fishing hole and you fill 2 buckets at lunchtime, which is what we were doing for 5 years,
Yeah.
it really sucks to go fish for 8 hours a day for one fish and sometimes none.
Yeah.
And so the true fishermen are what is left. The
Yeah.
guys that, either the new people that are like, know nothing else and they fish this way because it's how they're learning, or the veterans who are like, okay, back to the basics, back to the old fishing holes, back to, what we were doing. My job as a leader and consultant in this field this year is to strategically unpack what a mortgage originator truly is. And this is both to the executives and all levels of management and leadership and the originator themselves. We got into this economy a certain way because of economics. And there is an economic history, and we do a lot of comparing to past bad markets, but we'd be doing ourselves a huge disservice if we didn't understand that the ingredients of past bad markets and current markets are completely
Totally
different,
different. Yeah.
And so understanding those dynamics is what we teach in the classroom, understanding what the problems are that we're solving to in different ways. We teach a lot of unique ways for people to partner with realtors that have nothing to do with cold calling, have nothing to do with the old fashioned ways. Forget about bringing the first time home buyers. We're teaching
Yeah.
how to, solve to the problem of the inventory by doing listing strategies, soliciting listings and sellers, and doing expert mortgage advice for selling your home, and then handing that over to a realtor. So we call it the bring the bread to the table strategy.
I like
And
that.
it wakes realtors up and it gets their attention, and you're handing them money, and you're getting the buyer
Yes.
side, you're getting the buy side of the um, mortgage transaction when they buy after selling. But you're getting in front of it in such a way that you're really having a meaningful relationship. As far as refis go, we've been scared to sell this higher interest rate, but all of the homeowners that have low rates are reaching that 3-4 year mark, which historically for 40 years is
Yeah.
the mark of no return, where
Yeah.
the debt gets so high, it's painful, and the cash gets so low, it's painful. And so they're willing to take the higher rate, and we can lower the rate in the future, but we've got
Yes.
to start being more confident in our ask of who needs my help out there, and also overcoming the homeownership egos. Homeowners don't want to give up that lower rate because they feel stupid by doing it. And we've got to tell them that it's stupid to hold on to high interest rate credit card and loan debt and
Yeah.
to sit with no cash. And so this year's bounce back is going to come from strategy. It's not going to come from working longer hours. It's not going to come from
Yes.
trying harder. It is going to take tenacity. It is going to take fortitude. It is going to take sticking with it. My final word is this: keep the rain buckets out, keep your sales up. Sailboats are moving slow. You're rowing your sailboat this year. I know that sounds stupid, and a lot of people will dock the boat, but I'm telling you, the people who are in the water when the wind hits are gonna be the front runners of this. And believe me when I tell you, the 2020 ship is gonna be out front with all
Yes.
of our sails up, and we are spending a lot of time polishing the deck and getting ready for the next big wave, because this is not the end of the world. This is a
Yeah.
bridge between two places. You are on that bridge right now, somewhere on that bridge. And if you don't believe that you're going to cross over to the other side, then work on your mindset. If your mindset's good and you're just tired, we'll work on your physical energy. And if your strategy's poor, we'll work on that. And if you don't have answers for any of this, come work with us. Is
Well,
how
well,
I'll end that.
well, I would say even if you think you got your strategy,
Yeah.
I think sometimes people are so close to a situation they don't
Yes.
have the intellectual integrity
Yeah.
to really say, I need help.
Right.
Because especially for alpha males, which are generally, well, alpha people, excuse me, alpha people, um, they don't want to ask for help. But the true champions realize they need it. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, they needed Phil Jackson. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't Scottie Pippen that made the Bulls excellent. It wasn't Dennis Rodman, although I love Dennis Rodman. It was Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson was the game
And
changer.
Tim Grover, by the way. Have you read
Yes.
the book Winning? Tim Grover was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's personal development coach. I got to meet him and in a room of like 100 people. And let me tell you, that man's intimidating. And
Yeah.
he stood on the stage for a good long 5 minutes and he said, I'm not here to inspire you because inspiration wears off. I'm here to change the way you think. And he
Yeah.
went on to tell stories about Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and it's the same thing that you're saying.
Yep.
And so I will say this too, and I think you do a good job of this, and you're doing it now with this podcast. Who are you sitting with? It's time to assess your circle. I've had a lot
Yes.
of people that will pull me down. Last year, I don't mind saying to you in my real talk, I made an assessment halfway through the year last year, and I said, who do I need to throw out of my party? Because I got some people that are taking my time, weighing me down, always coming with problems, no solutions, negative. And I got to tell you, it was hard for me to do. But within a 30-day period, when I had this revelation, I was about 8 people less at this company, and I had made some personal pivots as well. And my days got easier. I
Right.
felt lighter. Oh
Yes.
my God, amen.
Yeah.
And so, it does matter who. You want to be a competitor? Well, don't go where you're the top person. Go where the competition's better than you.
Yes.
I sit at tables where I know I am not the smartest person at the table. Tomorrow, I'm getting up and I'm driving to Boston and I'm going to Shant Bonasian's Accelerate conference. This isn't a trade organization conference. It's not where I can get business. In fact, I can get no business at this conference. I am going to this conference purely for the education because it's a real estate focused and it's in this market. And I just love Sean because he's number one. But the main reason is because I never reached the height of being the number one LO in the country. I was up there. I was in like the top 5% in my day. And to sit in an audience with a man that has done that to me is like going to the Kobe Bryant of our industry and listening. I have always said, and I said it in Wise Eyes, and I wrote it in the Blueprint for Success. There are 3 rules to measure your success. How well are you improving? Where do you stack up to the averages, and how do you compare to number one? And the last one is one that people don't do. And they don't do it because they're sick of Susie getting the trophy every month at the company sales meeting. They're sick of the people that are put on the pedestals. I have a completely different relationship with people that are winning. I will sit front and center all day long at the conferences I go to. And people ask me all the time why I do that when I'm a consultant and supposedly in their minds, because they measure coaching like, do I need it? Do I know everything? I'm there to evolve. I'm there
Yes.
to learn what I'm doing right so I can go faster in that direction and be affirmed in what I'm doing. So I believe in education. It's brought me this far from 14, I mean, kindergarten to here, but really writing, reading, speaking, those are the fundamental things that evolve us. I do that in droves, and I'm writing my sixth book right now.
Oh,
It's
wow.
gonna be a barn burner. And the quotes are just starting to come out. The writing's in progress. We are commissioned for release in November and we are wheels up. The
Wow.
book's name is High, High. The tagline is Selling is a Drug.
Yeah,
And I
it
can
is.
tell you on the back of the book, they just had me write like the what description, and it says inside the brilliant and high functioning minds of the uber wealthy and successful, manic and crazed humans thriving and driving the American mortgage and real estate finance market. And I promise you, this book is going to set our industry on fire. I am going to share all that I know. This will be one of my legacy writings for the time that I've spent here, of the best of the best of the best that you can do to get high in sales. And yeah, so I'm doing everything I'm preaching.
I want a signed copy. I
Absolutely,
do.
100%. I want to make
Well,
you're going to bring me back on because by then
yes.
your podcast is going to be huge and I'm going to need some press for the book. And then
Heck yeah.
I'll be a repeat.
Christine, it has been a truly honor and a treat for whoever gets to listen. I highly recommend, with heartfelt and endorsement, anybody wanting to level up their business, level up their mindset, to reach out to you. How does anyone, mortgage industry or not, reach and get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's so easy that we have an email for the world that is solutions@visionyoursuccess.net. Solutions@visionyoursuccess.net. If you send an email there, you want information about what we do, someone will reach out to you. We have a very no pressure, laid back way of speaking to people. We really don't want to convince you to do coaching. This might sound anti-selling. We want to tell you what we do and then let you decide because we're not looking for people that we've got to constantly convince that this is the way. We are looking for people that are going to be additive to our community who come at least bearing the mindset of self-improvement, wanting self-improvement. And that's the key ingredient. We're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing us. And we've learned the hard way not to let everybody in that needs constant convincing because they're usually going to be the next quitter. So if that doesn't scare you away and you want to be part of our community, um, give us an email and we'll reach out.
Well, that's incredible. And I know you're also very prolific on social, especially LinkedIn. And you're wonderful, Christine. Thank you so much. I'm
Thank
looking forward
you.
towards doing this again.
Absolutely. Please join our Facebook group. That's the last thing I'll tell you. We have a Facebook group called 2020 Vision for Success, for loan officer success. And you can get a lot there for free from us. So thank you, Tommy. It was wonderful being here.
You're incredible. All right. Thank you so much, Christine. I love you. I adore you.
Yay.
So indebted to you. Thank you.
Oh, well, I hope it hit the mark. I think it's going to be nice, a nice one.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it, and what I love about it being literally the second one is I anticipate I'm not going to get any views for quite some time, but when it does kick, when it does,
So go
people
back to
I'm
it,
going to go
say, what
back
else does he have?
and they're going to see and they're like, "Oh my God, how have I not seen this?" And that's what
Yeah.
I'm hoping is and also you've been so generous with me in allowing me to be part of 2020.
Of
uh
course.
I couldn't help. I'm like, I need to do this. I got to do whatever I can to help bring people your way,
This is how it
and
works, though.
thank
This
you.
is how I work. Like I see souls that I want at my table. I put them there for a reason. It always comes back to me. I really live by the same set of principles. I think we've shared this, which is give away and you shall receive.
Yes.
And that is exactly what I do. And so I always feel like this is really great when I'm with like people and that sort of thing. I will tell you.